every word, and thank you, Terry. It's just always great to have you with us. I first want to acknowledge, the things that have been happening the last few weeks, in West Texas and in Boston, and in our spiritual realm, there's of course that beautiful thought that we want to find our center with this, and be a place of peace, and we do. I also want to acknowledge that in our humanness, it's very natural for us to be appalled by this. It's very natural for us to know that the behavior was absolutely wrong. There is nothing that we can say was quote unquote right about what has occurred in the realm of the behavior that took place here. And I am one to always want us to acknowledge our very human feelings, because it gets to the point, if we are not acknowledging what we're feeling, we're stuffing it. And it's better to acknowledge it and to feel it and to get it out in a safe environment, and then we move to really working with our principles. And I know that for myself, and I know for many of you, because you've shared this with me, that as we've worked with our spiritual practices, as we have continued to fill ourselves from the inside with peace, with love, as we have worked on that, we're not going to stay in those places near as long. We're going to feel them, but we're going to find our way very quickly back to center, where we can separate the person from the behavior. And that's when we talk about loving this person. We're not quote unquote loving the behavior. And I don't want you to think you have to do that, because you don't. But we're going to love the person, because we know that no matter what, that person is a brilliant, glorious, magnificent, divine child of God, no matter what that behavior may have been. So I just want to say that. And I loved the meditation today. Thank you so much, because I felt that energy just going out to the world, this peace that passes all understanding that comes from within us. So for the past few weeks, we've been talking about healing, physical healing, and we've talked about there's many different ideas about healing, and there's also the spiritual healing that occurs, but we're talking about physical healing for these few weeks. And we've been talking about healing through forgiveness. Last week we talked about healing through loving our bodies. And if you were not here on Wednesday night, I encourage you to get the CD to listen to a deeper experience of really moving into that place of loving our physical bodies. And what we've been talking about is that when we hold resentment, when we hold unforgiveness, when we hold blame, and the difference with that is, again, you're going to feel it. But when we're holding on to it and we're claiming it as ours and we're taking it everywhere with us, we are literally releasing, our brains release toxins into our physical bodies. And these toxins create the environment for illnesses to occur. So doesn't it make sense that we want to release the resentment and blame? Yes? Yes, we want to do that. So what are some reasons why we don't forgive? I wanted to talk about that for just a moment. Perhaps the person hasn't asked for our forgiveness. We feel that the person has really hurt us and they deserve our anger. We may feel that we're weak if we forgive. We think that forgiving them is the same thing as making or condoning the action. We feel that the best way to keep our distance between the person who's hurt us and us is to continue to hold that unforgiveness. And also, unforgiveness and resentment is also, it's a power trip, believe it or not, because we feel like we're in control somehow when we're holding on to that resentment and that blame. And so I want to just bring that up so we could just take a look at it within ourselves. I want to remind us that forgiveness does not mean that we do not set healthy boundaries. We absolutely set healthy boundaries. Forgiveness does not mean that we ever have to physically be in the presence of the person or persons. I know that there are things that we cannot imagine forgiving. So please remember that forgiveness does not condone the action. I love that I titled the talk today, "It is Finished." And I did that because I was thinking about You know, for a few weeks we were talking about the Easter story, and we were talking about Jesus, and we were talking about his journey. And here is this man who has gone through incredible betrayal. He has literally been physically abused. He has been denied by his best friends. He has been made fun of. He has been literally tortured. He has been through unbelievable things. And we talked about how now the vision for us can be the cross, of him on the cross, is that was the purest expression of what love is. That he could, even after all of that, he was saying to us, even you can release this. But I loved that the second to the last phrase of words that Jesus said was, "It is finished." And I know that that is looked at as being, it is finished, as in that which I came here for, the purpose which I came here for, it is finished. But I also want to offer that we could entertain the idea, and to me it makes perfect sense, that he was also saying to us, all of that stuff, you know what, it's finished, it's done. It's no longer going to be a part of my consciousness. And I can release it. I can actually release it that quickly. Remember that Jesus, you know, the stories about Jesus, to me it's always like taking us to this way extreme and saying really and truly that in a moment it can be done, and I believe that it can, but also that in our humanness we're probably going to have to process through some of these things, and that's okay too. That for most of us that's you know really what we're going to have to do. So I want to share with you a couple of stories that are true, and the process of forgiveness in these, because we can talk all we want about forgiveness, but sometimes when we have very real stories about how people work through a forgiveness process, it gives us more of an idea. So the first one comes from Mary Mann Morrissey, and this was from the Prosperity Plus class, but I loved this story. She says that there was a young man who she had performed his wedding when he was like 29 years old. And before this, when he was about 18 to 22, he wasn't in his best behavior time. He was a drug addict, and he had a very violent way of handling things, and so he ended up in prison for 5 years. But while he was in prison, he totally turned his life around. He got involved in AA, and he even got his college degree while he was there. So, you know, here she is now at 29 doing this wedding for him. Well, she didn't see him much after that for a while, and all of a sudden he calls and makes an appointment. And when he came in, he shared with her that he and his wife had separated. He adored his wife. That he and his wife had separated about 8 or 9 months ago, and this was really hurting him. And throughout this 8 or 9 months of this separation, he'd been pouring his heart out to his best friend and telling his best friend how much he missed her and how much he wanted her back, all the while not knowing that his best friend was having an affair with his wife. Ouch! Now, as you can imagine from his programmed past, all of this came up where he wanted to kill the guy, but he didn't really want to, which is why he reached out for help. So he comes to Mary, and he says, you know, I want to do this differently. I want to forgive him. And so she said, okay, well, here's what you need to do. She said, you know, a couple times a day, I want you to say this prayer. Say, may you have peace, may you have joy, may all good things come to you, and may you walk in peace. And she said, now you can begin this prayer any way that you want, but I encourage you to say it a couple times a day, and initially, you're not going to feel this prayer, but do it anyway. Okay, so he left. And I don't know, it was maybe about 5 or 6 weeks later, within a period of time, he came back, and she said she could see that something significantly had changed just in his demeanor. So she talked to him, and he said, well, I was really glad that you told me that I could begin the prayer any way that I wanted. He said, because for a while I began the prayer by saying, if a truck doesn't run over you, if a train doesn't dismember you, may you have peace, may you have joy, may you walk in peace, may you, la 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 la. And he said that's the way that he could do the prayer. But he said after about the 4th, 5th, or 6th day, it was kind of an unconscious thing. He said, he started to do the prayer, and all of a sudden he realized something had kind of shifted inside of him. And he got to thinking that, you know, this was his best friend. this had been his best friend, and he really did care about this man. And he thought, I hate the behavior, but I still want him to be happy. And he said, and then I thought about, my wife, that, I hate what she did, but I still wanted her to be happy. And he found that he could more easily say the prayer, may you have peace, may you have joy, may all good things come to you, and may you walk in peace. And it released him. Just moving through that process released him. And she said a number of years later, she did his second wedding for him, and she said, it was just to a wonderful woman who you could feel the energy that was so good between them. So that's one way to do it, and it's a very real way. And hear this again. Did he feel what he needed to feel in his humanness? Yes, he did. And I love that he could start his prayer by saying, if a truck doesn't run over you, if a train doesn't misremember, may you, may you, may you. But the point is, we're doing this other work to get us to this place. So the next story I want to share with you is, some of you have heard this story because this is my story. And the reason that I want to share this is because it's a very real process, that it's true, with the exception I've changed the names to protect the guilty. The innocent, the innocent. But it's a very real story, and it was a very real process, and I've used this process over and over and over again. So Sean didn't get his cue, sorry. I'm going to take a drink. Okay, so this, I used to have a friend, and in this case his name is Bluto. And one day, a bunch of friends and I were truly commiserating, really commiserating over what Bluto had done to us. You talk about a something session. We were in the midst of it, about how he had hurt us, about the way he had shown up, and all the things that he had done wrong. We were strong in the midst of this. But it was interesting because in the midst of that conversation, all of a sudden, a story came up for me, and it was the story of the Zen monks. The Zen monks who had to get someplace, and they had to walk, and they were walking, they came to a river, they had to get across the river, and there was a woman there, and she needed to get across the river, but she was afraid of the water. So one of the Zen monks picked her up, put her on his back, carried her across the water, put her down. The two Zen monks kept walking. About a mile out, the second Zen monk looked at the first Zen monk, and he said, I cannot believe that you did that. And the first Zen monk was like, what? And he said, that is so against our religion, that you would ever touch a woman. And yet you picked her up and you carried her across. And the first Zen monk looked at the second Zen monk, and he said, I put her down a mile back. Why are you still carrying her? And it was one of those light bulb moments for me, because here's what I realized, that I had been, and I have to say that it was by unconscious choice at that moment, but I had been carrying Bluto around with me, even though Bluto had not been in my life physically for a very long time, wherever I went. So I'm like, come on, Bluto, get in the car with me, because I have some things I want to say to you, Bluto, and this is what I'm going to say to you, and the whole way I'm driving, I'm just giving Bluto the what for, and I'm going to go into the grocery store, and oh, no, you're not staying in the car, you're coming in with me, and you're going to just get in this car with me, because as I'm buying my groceries, I'm going to tell you exactly what I think about you. And, oh, no, you're not staying in the grocery store, get back in the car with me, Bluto, so I'm not done with you yet, and then I'm going to drive home. Come into my house, Bluto, because I'm putting my groceries away, and I'm going to make dinner, and I'm going to get ready for bed. And oh, come into my most sacred place, because I'm not done telling you what I think about you, Bluto. As I'm going to bed, I'm going to give you the what for. And just stay here, because I guarantee you, when I wake up at 3 in the morning, I've got more to say to you. So you need to be here, so, And I realized, oh my gosh, I was carrying him everywhere that I went. And the Zen monk story reminded me that all I had to do was put him down. Sounds easy, doesn't it? Here's how I did it. It was a willingness and an awareness. And I've talked about this before, just our willingness, show me the way, just our willingness. But I had to be aware. And so those moments when Bluto came up in my mind, here's what I did, because I'm going to tell you right now, I was in my humanness and I was not in a place of love at this moment. So every time that Bluto came up in my mind, I would say, Bluto, you are not invited here, get out. Bluto, you are not invited here, get out. You know how the story of Jesus, when he is in the wilderness and he is tempted and he says, Satan, get behind me. You have no power over me. These are my error thoughts of Bluto. And I'm telling these error thoughts that are keeping who in pain? Is it keeping him in pain? No, keeping me in pain. I'm telling these error thoughts, get behind me, get out. You have no power over me. Now, I did this over and over again because remember, I invited Bluto everywhere that I went. So I had to be very aware and just to say, get out, get out, get out, get out. Okay, so this really did help me a lot. I found that I had been spending about 80% of my time, I'm going to say I was spending about 100% of my time in like craziness. And I would say that it got me to only spending about 20% of my time in like this, and have we all been there where it's just craziness? It's a craziness, this craziness that was going on. But what I realized was that I still had some work to do because I was not in a place of love at this point. It was just a matter of get behind me, you have no power over me. Ugh. It was still just a yuck. So this is where I went to the scripture in Matthew 5:44, where Jesus says, but I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. Kind of reminds us of what Mary Morrissey had as the prayer. May you have peace, may you have joy, may all good things come to you, and may you walk in peace. So what I did at that point was I just went into some time of meditation. And again, this was my very personal journey, but I share it as a way that maybe it could wake something up in us as to how we could walk through forgiveness. So in my meditation, I went in with the intention of forgiving Bluto. Okay, so in my meditation, I choose to see Bluto standing in front of me, and I say, I forgive you. I bless you, and I see good things for you, and I forgive you. But two interesting things happened for me, because in that meditation, all of a sudden, I found myself saying to Bluto, and please forgive me. Please forgive me for the way that I have harshly judged you, and all of these awful things that I have been saying about you and spreading about you. It was just toxic poison. And it shocked me because I didn't go into that meditation thinking I was going to be asking for forgiveness. I was forgiving Bluto. And the next thing that happened was that I was guided to just turn to myself and to forgive myself. To forgive myself for having not lived up to what I really desired to live up to, but just to fully forgive myself. And so I got to tell you, this process really, really freed me. And I'm like, this is great. I got it. I am free. I have forgiven. I have moved on. And then one day somebody brought Bluto's name up and bam, he was there again. And I was shocked because I thought, oh my gosh, I thought I did this. I thought I put this down. I thought that I was no longer going to have to deal with this. But here's the beauty of it. In Matthew, Peter asked Jesus, how many times should I forgive? And Jesus says 7 times, 70 times. Now, I had always interpreted that to mean if, no matter how many times somebody comes and does something to you, you just keep forgiving them, which I think still is a valid interpretation. But here's what it spoke to me at that point. I wasn't able to forgive Bluto the first time. And I wasn't able to forgive Bluto probably the 5th time or the 10th time. I maybe was getting closer about the 25th time, but by continuing to do what I knew I needed to do, bringing him to my center, blessing him, loving him, conferring good upon him, that eventually I was able truly to let him go. And the beautiful thing about that, and we talked many times about how, you know, Jesus, he was a master, and he had such incredible insight, because he knew that in our humanness we probably weren't gonna do it after one time. But he said 7 times, 70 times, which is just like this huge number. And I promise you that if you sincerely go into this with a desire to forgive, and you continue on, you won't get near that 7 times, 70 times. But you will need probably more than one time. But you just keep on keeping on. And you know the beauty of all of this? I never had to be in the physical presence of Bluto. Today, I know where Bluto is and what Bluto is doing, and I feel great about that. But I never had to be in the physical presence. Now, does this experience, does this forgiveness have an effect on Bluto? Absolutely, we're one. There's a connection. There's certainly that aspect that when I free myself, I free the other person energetically. But is it my job to change Bluto? Absolutely not. And I want you to know that, you know, next week we're going to talk about self-forgiveness, and that this is all about changing us. It's all about getting rid of that gunk that's in our spiritual field that is creating gunk in our physical bodies, so that we can have a freer, more healthy, more energetic, loving experience of life. Is that what we want? Absolutely. And know here that it is not just about people who are alive. If somebody has transcended, you can go through the same processes and forgive them. And I encourage you to do that. I loved that in the movie called The Wedding Date, this person was single, they were miserable, and finally one day this person says to their friend, "Do you think I want to be single and miserable?" And the friend looked them in the face and said, "Yes, that until you're ready to be unsingle and unmiserable, you will be." And I loved that, because it's the same with forgiveness, my friends. That, you know, that I know that there's many things that have happened in our personal lives that we say, "Do you think really I can forgive this?" And I want to say a huge yes, you can. Yes, you can. And that when you're ready to do it, what you need will be there for you. 100%, it will be there for you. It will show up in ways that absolutely surprise you. But I want to encourage you. I want to encourage you over and over again to walk this journey, to open yourself up. I loved in the meditation that you started to go to, like, you know, my family, my friends, my workplace, you know, and I could see us just expanding that to just think, is there anything that's showing up in any of that? My children, my parents, my siblings, you know, whatever, you know, my teachers, you know, my childhood friends. Is there anything showing up there that's any kind of a, you know, and if it is, okay, is there some work I need to do on that? Maybe there's not, but I encourage you to look at it, because this process alone, moving through forgiveness, will free so much up in your life, and it will bless you. It will bless you beyond measure. So have a great week forgiving. Namaste. Namaste.